I flew to Texas without telling my son. When I arrived, there was a sign on the door, honeymoon. Do not disturb. When I confronted my Dill, she said, a ceremony for only 800 people, only the most important ones. So, I decided to freeze their bank accounts. 2 hours later, I drove her crazy. I never imagined that a mother's love could be so easily discarded at 63. I thought I understood heartbreak. I buried my husband when Miles was only 12, raised him alone through his teenage rebellions, put him through college working double shifts at the diner. I thought losing Robert was the worst pain I'd ever endure. I was wrong. The Texas heat hit me like a wall when I stepped off the plane at Dallas-Fort Worth. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my phone trying to call an Uber. Miles didn't know I was coming. That was the whole point. Tomorrow was his 35th birthday, and I wanted to surprise him. I'd been planning this trip for months, saving every extra dollar from my part-time job at the local library. The flight had been my first in over 10 years. I'd gripped the armrest during takeoff, my stomach churning with excitement and nerves. The woman next to me had smiled kindly when she noticed my white knuckles' first time flying, she'd asked. I'd nodded, too embarrassed to admit it wasn't fear of flying that had me so worked up. It was the fear that maybe, just maybe I was being foolish, that maybe a mother shouldn't show up unannounced at her adult son's doorstep. But Miles was all I had left since Robert died. It had been just the two of us against the world. Sure, we didn't talk as much as we used to. He was busy building his consulting business in Austin, and I understood that young men needed space to grow to become the men they were meant to be. That's what I kept telling myself, when our weekly phone calls became monthly, then sporadic. The Uber driver was chatty, pointing out landmarks as we drove through Austin. I barely heard him. My mind was racing with all the things I wanted to tell Miles, how proud I was of everything he'd accomplished, how much I missed our Sunday morning pancake breakfasts, how the house felt too quiet without his laughter echoing through the halls. I'd brought his favorite chocolate chip cookies, the ones I used to pack in his lunchbox every day until he graduated high school. The recipe had been my mother's, passed down through 3 generations, the same cookies that had soothed scraped knees and broken hearts throughout his childhood. They were in my carry-on bag, carefully wrapped in the same blue tin I'd used for 20 years. When we pulled up to his apartment complex, my heart was hammering against my ribs. The building was nice, modern, with clean lines and well-maintained landscaping. I felt a surge of maternal pride. My boy had done well for himself. The sacrifices had been worth it. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, gathering my courage. The early evening air carried the scent of barbecue from somewhere nearby, and I could hear children playing in the courtyard. It felt like home, the kind of place where families were built and memories were made. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, my overnight bag feeling heavier with each step. Apartment 2B. I'd memorized the address from the return labels on his Christmas cards. My hand was raised to knock when I saw a piece of paper taped to the door, handwritten in elegant script that definitely wasn't Miles's messy scrawl. Honeymoon, do not disturb. The words hit me like a physical blow. I read them again, certain I'd misunderstood honeymoon. The paper crinkled in my shaking hands as I stared at those 2 simple words that changed everything. Miles was married. My son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone, had gotten married without telling me, without inviting me, without even mentioning he was engaged. I sank onto the nearby bench in the hallway, the overnight bag slipping from my numb fingers, the cookies scattered across the floor, some spilling from their careful wrapping. I stared at them, these symbols of a mother's love, now broken and forgotten on the cold concrete. When had he gotten engaged? How long had he been planning this? Had he stood at an altar promising to love and cherish someone forever while his own mother sat 3 states away, completely unaware that the most important day of his life was happening without her? My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around my lungs. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think straight. The hallway seemed to spin around me as the reality settled in like poison in my veins. I wasn't just excluded from his wedding. I was erased from it entirely. The girl next door poked her head out, probably wondering about the commotion. She looked at me with that particular mixture of pity and curiosity that I'd grown to hate since Robert died. "You okay, honey?" she asked. I forced a smile, the kind I'd perfected over the years. "I'm fine, dear, just dropping something off for my son." But I wasn't fine. I was the furthest thing from fine that a person could be. I gathered up the broken cookies, my hands moving automatically while my mind reeled. Each crumb felt like another piece of my heart breaking away. These cookies had been meant to celebrate his birthday, to bridge the growing distance between us. Instead, they were a pathetic reminder of how little I knew about my own son's life. As I stood there in that sterile hallway, clutching the remnants of my surprise visit, I realized something that cut deeper than the exclusion itself. Miles hadn't just forgotten to invite me to his wedding. He'd actively chosen not to tell me about it. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. The mother who had worked 3 jobs to pay for his college, who had sold her wedding ring to buy him his first car, who had cheered at every soccer game and graduation ceremony, wasn't important enough to witness the day he chose his life partner. I was nothing to him. Now, nothing at all. The paper on the door fluttered slightly in the air conditioning breeze, and I noticed something else: fresh flowers in a vase by the door, wedding favors scattered on a side table. I hadn't noticed before. They'd just returned from their honeymoon. This wasn't even their wedding day. This was their return to married life, and I was still discovering it by accident. My legs felt weak as I made my way back down the stairs. Each step echoed in the stairwell, a hollow sound that matched the emptiness spreading through my chest. The Uber app trembled in my hands as I tried to call another ride back to the airport. But where would I go? Back to my empty house in Kansas, back to the job that barely paid the bills, to the life that suddenly felt meaningless. I sat on the curb outside Miles, building my suitcase beside me like a faithful dog, and let the tears come. They were the kind of tears that come from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed, the kind that tastes like 23 years of single motherhood, of sacrifice, of believing that love was enough to keep a family together.